Thank you all for tuning in today to this panel discussion with organized by D3 with Stellar Cyber, along with our guests from VERSPRITE and Highwire Networks. So the panel discussion will be recorded and it'll be available on demand. We also have a Q&A session at the end. I encourage you all to ask questions, also because the person who asks the best question wins a $50 gift card. And if you've been a regular to our webinars, you know that we're notorious for giving more than one gift card as well. So yeah, be sure to ask your questions. It's pretty much common knowledge that cybersecurity tools today have evolved greatly to help the good guys fight cyber threats and keep adversaries at bay. However, over the last decade, threats have also become stealthier, and as gatekeepers, practitioners, or decision makers, we're all on this collective journey to win the end game. It can honestly be hard at times to not be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of threats that we come across. If you haven't heard of us before, D3's Smart SOAR platform lets security operations teams automate any workflow regardless of complexity across Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 activities. We are being increasingly used by both enterprises and MSSP organizations. So we know for a fact that the old ways aren't enough. We've got to work smarter. And in today's panel discussion with our MSSP partners, VERSPRITE and Highwire Networks, and our integration partner, Stellar Cyber, we are going to uncover just why we need open and agnostic security solutions to protect against modern-day cyber threats. Both VERSPRITE and Highwire Networks are customers for D3 Smart SOAR as well as Stellar Cyber. With some help from my good friend Kevin, who is a senior product manager at Stellar Cyber and the moderator of today's session, we will uncover just some of the strategies and best practices that these professionals use in their business. Kevin, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Amardeep. Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Wilson, and like Amardeep said, I'm a senior product manager at Stellar Cyber. Stellar Cyber is an open XDR platform, so we love to integrate with everyone and anyone. A little bit about myself. I've been in product management for about 5 years, but I'm the practitioner side of the table for most of my 17-year career, including CISO of a Fortune 500. And I'm very excited to be able to moderate today with our guests. First of all, we have Mr. David Barton. He is the CTO of Highwire Networks. Want to say hello, David?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Dave Barton. As Kevin mentioned, I'm the CISO/CTO of Highwire Networks. I've been doing cyber for a very long time. Started in the Air Force back in 1988, and I've been doing technology and protecting of data and assets since that entire time.
Awesome to have you here, David. And also we have with us Tony Uceda-Velez. He is the CEO of VERSPRITE Networks. Tony?
Hey, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Hey, well, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so I'm the CEO of VERSPRITE. We are a cybersecurity consulting company based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We've been in business for about 16 years. We provide both point-in-time and managed security services to over 400 global clients. Myself, I've been a former CISO, former developer, former engineer. I started on the IT side of things and then switched over to security around probably 18, 20 years ago. But really, security has always been a factor of my IT life. I'm also the author of the of the risk-centric threat modeling book, which was a threat modeling methodology that was developed by me and a co-author from OWASP. And I'm also the OWASP Atlanta chapter leader here in Atlanta, Georgia. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, both of you. To kind of get started and to level set with everyone on the webinar here, today we're going to be talking a lot around not only tools, but just overall processes and procedures that make successful security. One of the biggest aspects that we all find in security a lot of the time is people. And in that kind of spirit, I wanted to start with you, David, and ask this kind of question. Your SOC needs trained staff and solid processes. So what are you doing there at Highwire to kind of make this a reality?
So, I think at a fundamental level, your SOC team needs to have a lot of foundational knowledge. Whether you're tier 1, 2, or 3, there are things that they need to know that will make them better at their job. Managing tools is kind of easy depending on who you ask, but managing outcomes is harder. And so being able to understand the tools inside and out is a requirement. So we put them all through the vendor-led training. On top of that, just because you know what something is doesn't mean you know the impact. So there's additional training on tying together risk with an event so that they can quickly identify what's important and what's not. And then I think, the reason we're here today is to talk about how do we make it better? And so we're teaching our analysts how to use advanced tools like Stellar Cyber and like D3 so that they can quickly pivot on data sets and find the needle in the haystack. Continuous training has got to be the mantra for anybody who's in this space. Everybody on this call, you guys all know this evolves every day. There's not a day goes by that the cybersecurity world is boring. It's just changing and evolving every day. And if you don't have your training program lined up to teach your people to evolve every day, you're going to miss it. They're going to fall behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, do you have any kind of special training or any sort of messages that you like to give your folks working for you?
Yeah, so we make sure that we have to get senior leaders come in, right, that have come from different big enterprises. We have team members that have come in that are leaders within the group that are, Fortune 10X, leaders. I myself was a senior director for a Fortune 50 company and a former CISO. And we try to attract those senior leaders that can help cultivate talent, whether they're coming in, new from school, from a place where we feel that we can leverage a lot of their skills, or they're somewhere mid-range around their career. I think for what we do is we do a lot of group projects and a lot of group efforts, right? I think that tackling things together over different types of group tasks is so important and key. I'm not personally a big fan of certifications. We have some obligatory certifications as a company. We have an accreditation, from Crest out of the UK. They're an accreditation firm for pen testing, elite pen testing. But at an individual level, I think oftentimes accreditations or certifications at a personal level really kind of put individuals into a box. We always have a saying at VERSPRITE that we want to be able to get employees to think psychologically like a criminal. It's so important to be able to emulate criminal intent and not get stuck too much behind frameworks and too much behind, just simply textbook theoretical security stuff. But as mentioned, this is an industry that will humble you every single day because there's way too many attack vectors, way too many evolutionary attack surfaces. It's interesting geopolitical times right now. So it's really an industry where you have to keep up with what is going on in terms of campaigns, threat attribution details for threat actors, and of course, the evolving attack surface landscape. But I've been in ITIS for about 28 years now, and I'm a student every day. And that this is, I founded VERSPRITE. So it says a lot of where we come in every single day, being a student and making sure that we don't ever have this ideology that we've conquered and we've reached the summit of knowledge, because that's just simply not the case.
No, I absolutely agree. I think it's really important that we always continue to, strive to better ourselves, and that we don't get soft in a lot of areas, especially when it comes to security, because it's constantly evolving. And it's in that kind of spirit too. We talked about the nuances of people and the differences there. And I'm kind of wondering, David, every SOC has its own kind of nuances. What are some things that make your SOC unique?
I think, Kevin, I think for us, we are a channel-only SOC, so we do things a little bit different than some of our competitors who have direct customers. So now we manage not just relationships with end customers, but we also manage relationships with the MSPs that are bringing us opportunities. And so that has its own set of challenges, as you can probably imagine. I think for us, the thing that separates us amongst our competitors and even amongst our partners is we are constantly looking at how do we make the dwell time conversation better? How do we capture statistics and metrics that show how quickly or how effective or how efficient that we're getting? And, back to this conversation between what Stellar does and what D3 does, D3 gives us the ability to automate in a repetitive fashion all of the tier 1 or most of the tier 1, tier 2 type of tickets. That means we quickly, in parallel, get through a lot of data. I think Tony would probably agree. There's so much noise across all of the toolings that we manage, that other MSSPs manage. And the challenge is getting through it all in a repeatable, consistent, scalable fashion. And look, stuffing terabytes of data into a data lake every day is great. You got log storage, you got other things, but being able to evaluate that data on the fly and build detections and build responses and reduce that mean time to detection and mean time to response, that's our goal, right? And so that's one thing that differentiates us as a MSSP partner, is we're constantly looking at what do we see, what don't we see? That has to be a question that we ask. And then how do we go see it, right? How do you prepare for the unknown? It's, you're applying frameworks, you're applying technologies, you're looking at your gaps. And that's what we do. When we see traffic spikes that don't make sense, we ask questions. We look at all the telemetry around it. We correlate that with Stellar. We build detections to find those things. And I think on top of it all, and I think Amardeep will appreciate this, D3 helps us get there quicker.
No, that absolutely makes sense. You kind of mentioned some stuff, David, around, measuring and kind of like getting some metrics out there. So, Tony, kind of bouncing back over to you, like, how do you value and measure like the advantages of an open and agnostic approach to security versus something more consolidated that we're seeing a lot now in the marketplace?
Well, I think you always have to have an agnostic and open approach. If you, again, flipping it, the challenge of the defense on its head and thinking about it offensively, like I mentioned, where, at VERSPRITE, we're always trying to think more adverseriously when we're doing defense, is, building, one of the things that we do differently is we build an organizational threat model to preface our virtual SOC and MDR solutions for our clients. So when we think about a tool set or solution set or an approach, for us, we'll look and see what sort of approaches are out there. But we have to ask ourselves, are cyber criminals, using an approach? Well, they are, but they're not exactly, it's not going to be on the next NIST special publication, right? It's not going to be the next ISO specification, or won't be the next OWASP, special project. So with that, you kind of have to come up with an approach that embellishes all of the key ingredients and variables that you need for threat detection, for building out metrics. Some basic metrics are, of course, on identifying our metrics that are driven by the solution, right? The solution says, okay, you detected, 2 cases of ransomware alerts over a past period of time, or you detected X amount of cases of phishing alerts for a certain amount of time. But what does that really mean, right? That's tool driven alerts. I think combining the technology, right, with obviously with some of the capabilities with the SOAR platform that D3 offers, combined with an approach, right, that really provides valuable metrics to your stakeholders, right? Who are the stakeholders? You have your business lines of businesses that have executives, and they want to know: are we protected? Are we protected? What are the metrics that make sense to them? And this is why we were a big staunch believer of threat modeling. The PASTA threat modeling methodology was endorsed by the cybersecurity czar at the White House and under the Obama administration, former Howard Schmidt. He actually wrote the preface for the book, and a lot of that methodology lends from military background. So if you're going to play defense, it's good to have open agnostic tool sets that mesh with commercial tool sets. Really important to have KPIs and KRIs, right, that are mixed in. And but make sure that they make sense to your specific organizational threat model is kind of my 2 cents on that.
Absolutely. Just kind of sticking in the same realm there when we talk about tools and everything. Maybe David, I'll have you lead off with this one. Why is it important to unify and integrate disparate tools? I mean, you spoke about some of the automation that D3 provides you in your SOC workflow there, but like, how would you measure the impact to your company overall or to your customers' outcomes?
Every year they have a giant security show called RSA, and if you've ever been, it's astounding the number of people, the number of vendors, the number of booths. And so imagine you've got 2,000 point solutions that don't talk to each other, that don't share data, that don't share threat intelligence and telemetry. It becomes problematic for the defender, in this case, to quickly sift through that noise and correlate the event on the endpoint with the traffic ingestion anomaly on the firewall and understand the risk, because every one of us are playing a risk management game every day, right? And game is probably not the right word. It's not a serious enough word, but we're playing a risk management game, and we have to be better than the bad guys. And so when you've got disparate tools that don't share data, that don't have API controls, that are a standalone point solution, it's hard, and in some cases extremely difficult and impossible in some cases, to be able to correlate that behavior and build responses that drive the outcomes that we're looking for, right? So Kevin, if we're focused on outcomes, we've got to have better tools that talk to each other. We've got to have the ability to share data amongst the disparate systems. But I think to Tony's point earlier, we can't be tied to vendors because tomorrow there might be a new EDR that's the best on the market, and we need to be nimble to be able to switch in and out. And tools like D3 and Stellar let us focus on the outcome instead of the tool itself. And so I know I answered both questions, but at the end of the day, tools that talk to each other are important. API connectivity is essential. And then having an open ecosystem that says, oh, there's a new endpoint, let's plug it in, let's go. And that's the model I think that all MSSPs should be thinking about.
Yeah, so I guess that kind of blends in there with, Highwire always saying they're meeting customers wherever they're at. And, that's something that the agnostic tool set really kind of helps you achieve, right, David?
It totally does. And if you think about the reason we do this, is we find a partner who's got 10 end customers, and customer one's got Sentinel-1, and customer two's got CrowdStrike, and customer three's got cyber reason. And it's not reasonable for us to go in and say, yeah, we'll manage one of those. The other two you got to replace. And the end customer goes, yeah, that's not going to work. I just invested in these Palo Altos. Can't you manage that? And the answer is we can. So being vendor agnostic, meeting the customer where they're at with the tools that they have, supplementing those tools with what our partners have and supplementing those tools with what we have, we build a defense in depth framework that lets us go and chase and defend against the bad guys. And so I think you have to meet them where they're at. We're not an MDR that's tied to a vertical of a technology vendor. We just don't care.
It makes a lot of sense, and I think that's really important for a lot of customers out there in the world to be able to not have to replace and rip their entire tech stack anytime they need to meet new challenges. And in that kind of vein, Tony, I wanted to ask you, how do you identify the right technology investments for your security requirements rather than, chasing the latest and greatest out there kind of thing?
Well, I think at first it begins with capability. One of the reasons we've developed a relationship with Stellar and D3 was looking at the company. I said before, you have to be tool agnostic, right? It doesn't mean that necessarily you can't forge strategic relationships with key, companies. A lot of, Stellar and D3 are more than just one product, right? And so when we VERSPRITE picked the relationship with Stellar and D3, we picked companies, right, that had a commitment to research, a commitment to engineering. And that's super important, right? Because collectively, you want your partnerships to recognize that there is a dynamic threat landscape. So how are you all collectively going to pivot? Now, yes, of course. I mean, just like any MSSP, we at VERSPRITE, we come in if someone's running their flavor of the month for SIM, right? And they don't want to budge, and they made a 10-year commitment to the technology vendor because they got signed from a prominent security conference. We're not depending on the technology, right? We have to align the technology to the threat model. It all comes back down to the threat model. If we're going to come into an organization and simply acquiesce to a technology set that may not be adequate to their overall threat model based upon their industry, based upon their information model, based upon their product deployment model, based upon their dependencies on supply chain, et cetera, then we're just acquiescing to their basically the relationships that they've established with security vendors. That's not a defensible security program. So, oftentimes, it may take, obviously there's a serious CapEx that companies obviously spend for hardware, for software, for SaaS. And that's not to say that, if the threat model says you have to pivot because you have archaic, technology that has a security debt built into, archaic, functionality, we will create a roadmap, right? So it's important to make sure that the name of the game is risk mitigation. How do you get there? Recognizing that no tool is a security bullet, right? It's not going to provide you that single level of defense. Then if you go into an environment and you do see that, they have ABC tech stack or DEF tech stack, it has to not aligning to a framework doesn't really do anything. And again, this is 27 years of framework banking, regulated experience. Frameworks are the starting ground. Criminals don't care about your frameworks. They don't care if you're SOC 2 certified. They don't care if you're PCI certified. They don't care if you're high trust certified. Insert alphabet soup. You know the drill. What they do care about is your information. And they're going to go through orthodox and traditional ways to get it. So your technology stack has to reconcile as effective countermeasures in that threat model. And this is the thing that really is, something that we talk about a lot at VERSPRITE is, do you understand the model of threats that is facing your attack surfaces? And one great way, one of the things that you asked the question earlier, what do you do differently, right? Well, at VERSPRITE, we do a purple team before our services. A lot of times when you're doing an MSSP, people connect the extension cords and say, okay, I see your SIM, your EDRs are feeding my SIM, your WAF are feeding my SIM, your firewalls are feeding my SIM. Round of applause, a lot of success. It's a lot of checkboxing. What does that really mean, right? What does that actually mean in terms of defense? You have to put it to the test. And that's why we like to always do a purple team to evaluate. And the purple team that we do is tied to an organizational threat model. So we kind of have our own special sauce in doing this, where we truly see, hey, are your things that are feeding your SIM, are they actually providing valuable information? Because you know the saying, garbage in, garbage out. And that garbage that comes out is going in front of SOC analysts and people that are first line defense that have to make decisions on what is real and what is not real. So I know there's a lot there, but yes, tool agnostic, absolutely. And even, approach agnostic, because that's always going to dynamically change. But I think a key part to our success has been partnering up with Stellar and D3 and partnering up with the right partner, right? We're not necessarily going to get in bed with everybody because a lot of companies in cybersecurity are just looking for, an exit strategy, right? Product-based companies, right? They're looking to build, get valuation, get accounts, get the valuation, make investors happy, and then exit. That's not exactly, going to bode well. We want companies that are serious about, providing great products where automation is working and integrations are growing and correlation capabilities are efficient and very quick and timely. And this is one of the reasons that we decided to venture with Stellar and D3 over the past couple of years.
No, it's really important. I like how you mentioned a lot kind of around the intangibles of a company. You're not necessarily looking for a vendor, you're looking for a partner. And I think that's a lot, really true with a whole lot of our, shared customers and different customers out there in the marketplace. Everybody wants somebody that has their best interest in heart. Like people buy security tools to do security work to help them enable their jobs. So it's really, it's really important. Now I'm going to kind of like open it up to everyone here, so we can just have a nice kind of back and forth around just some like good advice and feedback that we've all gotten over our time. On the screen right now, we got almost 100 years worth of security experience. Just in general, maybe just open it between David and Tony here. Security is all about change. Tony was touching on a lot of different things around frameworks and stuff, changing threats, requirements, technology. Like, how does Highwire, how does VERSPRITE, how do you stay agile in these changing worlds?
I think one of the things that I like to talk about, Kevin, when I'm on stage, is challenge the norm. We've become so complacent with our tools that we're not checking to see, is there something better? There are so many tools out there that do average work, and I would probably say everybody on the call would agree with that. But if you're caught in a stack of tools that you go, oh, this is the only thing we know, and this is all we're going to do, you're going to miss out on some opportunities to be better. Because if you think for a second the bad guys aren't working to be better, they are. Tony mentioned it as well. Every day there is a cat and mouse, good guy, bad guy scenario happening in the world every day, every minute. I think I saw in September of this year was the most amount of ransomware attacks for any year up to that point. By September, they had eclipsed the year before and the year before. And what that tells me is that it's not slowing down, right? And we're seeing more and more products come out in the industry that are trying to solve the problems. And so in my mind, the one thing I advise people all the time is look at your stack. And if it's not exactly doing what it should be, if it's not scalable, if it's not extensible via APIs, if I can't do more with it, is it the right pick, right? Is it the right product solving the right problem that you have? So, don't be tied to a stack. find the best thing that works for your business, and then go and execute against that.
And what are your thoughts on there, Tony?
Yeah, staying agile is hard. I think it really comes down to, it begins with the company culture, in terms of how that's done. I think that in security inherently, especially, for those that have worked in big enterprises, it's easy to not have a sense of urgency. I think the consulting life and then, being in an MSSP where you're working first, second, third shift, you know that any given alert, if you're desensitized and you're at the end of your third, if you're working third shift and you're at the end of your shift, you want to make sure that you're as attentive, right, in that last hour of work as you were in the first hour. And it's hard, right, because we're humans, right? So this is why the technology is imperative. Good technology that does the correlation. And then, for us, in addition to the secret sauces that are provided with Stellar and D3 as a SIM and SOAR platform, respectively, we, apply that threat model as context. Does this particular event that's happening is it related to supporting a threat in my customer's threat model? That's in energy, that's in transportation, that's in retail, that's in, banking, et cetera. Staying agile, means to be able to know to what degree you take your research and analysis and to what degree you stop, because you can easily go down multiple different rabbit holes, right? In any particular research realm. And that does not allow for an agile work environment. So that's one, is making sure that you have a kind of a good training regimen so that employees can know to what degree how to research. A lot of individuals don't know how to research. Oftentimes I've talked to individuals that say, I'm still researching this issue. And it's like, days. And I'm like, they could never work at VERSPRITE because that's what I call more enterprise life, right? Where you're triaging, you're wanting to make sure time is of the essence, especially when an event could actually turn into an incident, and an incident can turn into a breach, and a breach can turn into a major liability that gets you on the front page, and even worse, gets you into a legal court case, right? As we've seen over the past couple of weeks with even some prominent CISOs in the industry. So I would say one is, making sure that how to research is one. And number two is to be able to have a good workflow. One of the things that we love about the solutions that we have with Stellar and D3 is to be able to, it fits well within a workflow of triaging, initial, analysis, correlate. It does a lot of the correlation, for us on the Stellar side. It provides automation for response on the D3 source side. So, if I'm on that third shift and I'm on that last hour, and there is something that is notable that meets a certain pattern that collectively as a group, we have decided this is a non-negotiable. These next sequential steps are what we need to do when we're faced with speared phishing attacks, or when we're faced with, some level of privileged escalation attack on the domain. These sort of things need to happen. Now we have a technology that can, go ahead and put things into motion, right? Even if we're on that third shift and working that last hour. So I would say those two are really strong components, characteristics of what we really leverage within our threat intel group at VERSPRITE that I would recommend for agile work performances.
Makes a lot of sense. And hey, David, if you can jump on here as well, because this is kind of last question before we move into the Q&A for everybody. But David, Tony, what is the most important feedback you've ever gotten from your customers?
I'll jump in first, Tony. One of the things that we focus on with our customers is we try to be easy to do business with. And when there are bumps along the way, what we've heard from our customers is, and you guys actually care. You guys are responding to the challenges we have to make our lives better. And my guess between Kevin and Tony, you guys have used outsourced MSSPs in your careers. And, in a lot of cases, they're ticket factories. They see something and they send you an email, and at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, none of us are looking at it. So the challenge is being responsive, being a trusted advisor to your customers, so that one, they want to use your services, but two, they trust that you're going to respond in their behalf and you're going to do the right things for them, and being able to show outcomes and efficacies that are garnered by using Stellar, that are garnered by using D3 together. It opens their eyes. And so, for me, the aha moment is when I've got a partner who says, we left our other MSSP because they wouldn't listen to us, and you guys put 3 people in front of us because you wanted to hear it and fix it. And to me, that was one of the most valuable things I got from a customer.
So there's 2 things that I can think of. One is, well, first, the golden rule is, always definitely listen to your customers, as David pointed out. It's super important. They know how to run their business, and as security professionals, no security professional on the planet knows, how the inner workings of any client business works more than they do, right? They're reaching out for our expertise on, threat response, on threat mitigation, risk reduction, et cetera. But historically, some of the things that I think have been iconic for me, now having run VERSPRITE for now close to 17 years, has been when a client says, "Hey, do you understand how we make money?" And that's become an internal kind of a creed that we have for like all consultants. It doesn't matter if they've had 25 years of experience or 5 months of experience or a college grad. Number one objective is, do you understand how your client makes money? Because if you don't understand how your client makes money, then how can you basically contextualize a threat to, part of their business? And do you understand how the threat is actually affecting that part of their business, whether it be an internal, environment or a product-based environment to which they make money from and stuff like that. So I think that's been one of the golden nuggets that that really comes to mind. But always, staying attentive and listening to what the client, says. It doesn't mean that you necessarily agree. And I want to make sure that that's really clear. Oftentimes, the client may have some surface level security knowledge, right? That's coming from some of these conferences that were mentioned, like RSA or Black Hat or whatnot. And they take that to the bank. Well, unfortunately, that is not that. Sorry, I think I got interrupted there. But unfortunately, that's not something to build a security plan on. But in any case, those are that's the key recommendation there, is understanding how your client makes money, so you can contextually align security to that business objective and to those use cases.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tony. Thank you, David, for your feedback. And Amardeep, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This was a very intense half an hour, and I loved hearing every minute of the conversation, of the discussion. I see that we've received some questions and I'm just going to start round robining them between Tony and David. But for the others in our audience, if you have questions, gentle reminder that you could drop them into the chat or into the Q&A box, where they can be seen by all panelists. So the first question, and it starts off with as MSSPs, but David, I'm going to ask you to take this question and answer as a master MSSP. So you're signing up essentially to protect multiple organizations, and that's serious business. It's not an easy mission. How do you simplify the management of multiple clients? And I know you kind of alluded to this before, but how are you able to involve your clients in the incident response process?
So yeah, I think the first part of that question is, you have to have technology partners that support true multi-tenancy, right? Being able to have 10 partners with 10 customers means I've got to be able to isolate and segment the data by customer and then give the partner the ability to log in and look at the data. And more importantly, let us at the top of that tree, or the top of the multi-tenancy tree, look into all of it. And so the short answer there is the tooling that we pick into our stack, or the tooling that our customers already have, we have to find a way to make it multi-tenancy light or capable, which we've done many times. And then that lets us automate and manage and scale the detection and response capabilities of whatever tools they have. And I think more importantly, Amar, is to share that data across those tenants. And I'm not talking about attacks on Tony's machine. I'm talking about threat intelligence that we derive from customer A is benefiting customer B. So I think that's probably the first part of that question. What was the second part? I apologize.
The second part was how are you able to involve your clients in the incident response process?
Got it. So what we do as part of an onboarding of a partner or an end customer is we spend some time to understand risk appetite. You know, if the folks on the webinar haven't heard risk enough, Tony and I talk about it, Kevin talks about it. Risk is what we're managing. And so some of our customers are, like a bank, for example, are very risk averse. They don't want me to automatically do some things. And so in the onboarding, we sit down and we understand what's your risk appetite. What are you comfortable with us automating? And then in the event of a incident or a breach or something where an IR team is needed, here's what we do, here's what the customer does, here's where the third party IR team comes into play. And so, you know, I think listening to the customer, understanding what their requirements look like, marrying that up with the capabilities that we have from an automation perspective, from an event correlation, anomaly detection capability between D3 and Stellar, and then helping the customer understand what a good response plan should look like in the event of an IR moment.
Okay. I think that's a great response. Thank you, David. Tony, the next one is actually a question that was, I didn't select it for you, but the person asking the question did. So you've been in this industry for 17 years and you've now got your own threat models. You talked about PASTA. Consolidation seems to be a big industry trend. How do you decide choosing between best of breed solutions and single vendor solutions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, so when we, at any given point in time, I'm sure if someone came in and offered like, you know, $100 billion for Stellar, we'd probably, you know, wouldn't see a lot of the people around in a couple of months. And it's something that, you know, there is a lot of consolidation. And so, you know, we're looking, but there are companies that are instantiating their business model to simply have an exit. They start a business and develop a product to have an exit. And that's not who we particularly like to do business with. We like to do business with people that are passionate about what they do. And that's from the top all the way down. So in an industry where there is a lot of consolidation, yeah, there is a level of due diligence that you have to do when you're vetting anybody, your tool-based vendors, your MSSP, you know, vendors and whatnot. I think one key question that's never asked, you know, we've been onboarded to, you know, close to 500 global companies, and, you know, they have their practical procurement vendor management questions, right? But they never ask, like, what is the vision and direction of the company from a business standpoint? I think that's a super important question, especially in this industry to the point of consolidation, right? So, because you don't want to build a security program where, you know, with all the things that are changing dynamically, attacks are changing dynamically, the attack surface that you are managing, you know, from an IT perspective is changing, you know, your supply chain, right? Your supply chain of dependencies of frameworks and libraries, that they're changing. So, you know, you want to make sure that the goals and mission of your strategic partners, right, they're not changing. So it's important to vet that out beforehand.
I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you a question of my own. So you've now deployed automation. You can focus on growing the business. So what's the next step change in effectiveness for VERSPRITE over the next 2 to 3 years? What are you focused on?
Yeah, so there is a maturity model that you can do with respect to incident response, right? So, you deploy your tools, you have assuming data telemetry, right, which is part of the, I guess, if you do crawl, walk, run, that's where you're standing upright is where you've achieved, a data telemetry for your attack surface. You've now instantiated, your automatic playbooks, great. Now you're getting closer to running, right, in terms of that maturity level. What's next is metrics, right? I think one of the hardest things to do is to measure how you're doing. Are you looking at all the related threats? Are you engaging on leveraging, for example, canary tokens in the environment so that you can do some level of deception-based analysis within your environment, right? You don't want to assume just because you've implemented, you've gone through some playbooks instantiated that you're done. You're never done. You're never done. You can measure to see how you're doing. If truly, you're, for example, let's say that you've created 100 different automation playbooks. Well, what happens if 50% of them are not even firing off? What good is it to have instantiated those playbooks if they're not actually being used? That means you don't really understand your threat model, right? But there's a lot of things that you can do. I mentioned canary tokens as a way of kind of incorporating deception-based, baiting of attackers that are in your environment. You can measure and see, what sort of the effectiveness of some of the controls that are feeding into your automation and things like that. So I think one of the toughest things is that threat intel component, right? How do you make sure that the threat intel that's coming into your organization, how is that affecting and influencing the playbooks dynamically, right? Oftentimes I've seen that playbooks can get static, right? They're developed, they're left, and they just assume that they work. And that's a bad mistake. So there needs to be a process where, you evaluate and say, how does my threat intel substantiate this playbook is actually needed? So I think that's really important.
Okay, I know we've run over time already, and time just flew by. We, scheduled this panel discussion for 45 minutes. So I'm gonna close this now in the interest of time for everybody. But before we do that, I want to say a big thank you to our audience, our panelists, Tony and David, our moderator, Kevin, for taking time out to be with all of us today. This concludes the session, and from all of us at D3 Security and Stellar Cyber, we wish you the very best in your cybersecurity journey. If you have any questions that have not been answered and you'd like to have them answered, you can reach out to D3 or Stellar at the email IDs listed above on the screen. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.